My name is Alex, and I am 25 years old. I am a university student, living alone in a small apartment not far from campus. That morning, the sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, painting golden lines across my desk where my laptop waited, already humming quietly. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warm, bitter aroma filling the small kitchen. I took a sip and stared at the walls, thinking about my brother, Jake. He is 5 years older than me, but we have never been close. Not really. I thought he hated me. Or maybe he simply didn't care. His voice is quiet, his smile rare, and his words often cold. I have always assumed that his silence meant indifference, that his distance meant he never wanted to share in my life. My chest tightened as I remembered the last conversation we had. It was brief, almost dismissive. "I'll handle things on my own," I whispered to myself, feeling my hands grow slightly clammy as I clutched the coffee mug. Why does he never ask about my day? I dressed quickly, the sound of my shoes scraping against the hardwood floor echoing through the empty apartment. I thought about the bus ride to campus, the hum of engines, the smell of asphalt heated by the morning sun. People passed me, chatting and laughing, but I felt apart from them. I always felt apart from Jake, like an invisible wall separated us, even when we shared the same house growing up. 3 days later, or maybe it felt like years, I found myself staring at a photograph on my desk. It was of us as children, Jake holding my small hand, smiling faintly, eyes warm. I shook my head. I had long convinced myself that those smiles were rare, fleeting, meaningless. I know him, I told myself, but a small doubt tickled the back of my mind. The tension inside me grew as I sipped my coffee again. I thought about our childhood, the nights I stayed awake, hoping he would notice me, the times I wanted to tell him about my struggles, my fears, and the times I never did. Silence had always been his choice, or so I thought. My heart began to race slightly, my fingers drumming on the table. I didn't know then that the quiet I had blamed for so long was not coldness. It was care, hidden and silent, waiting for the right moment to show itself. I glanced out the window at the busy streets below. Somewhere along those paths, life was already preparing to surprise me. I just didn't know it yet. My days followed a predictable rhythm. I woke early, brewed coffee, and dressed quickly for campus. The hum of the city woke me gradually, the distant chatter of street vendors, the squeal of brakes, the faint aroma of baked bread from nearby cafes. I often stopped by my favorite spot near the library, a small cafe where the barista already knew my order. Black coffee, no sugar. The warmth of the cup in my hands felt like a small comfort before the rush of lectures and assignments. University life was challenging. Tuition fees weighed heavily on my mind, and I often counted every penny when buying lunch. My scholarship helped, but I still had to work part-time at a small bookstore after classes. I loved books, but my fingers sometimes ached from long hours of handling dusty pages. The rustling of notebooks and the faint click of keyboards filled the library as I studied. These were my small joys, quiet moments where I could focus and escape the weight of everyday concerns. Jake, my brother, remained distant. Our conversations were short, functional, almost like two strangers who happened to share the same last name. He rarely asked how my day went. I tried not to notice, but it stung when I shared something important, and he merely nodded or mumbled, "That's fine." I often wondered if he ever cared. The thought made my chest tighten, and I would whisper to myself, Maybe he's too busy to care. Lisa, my best friend, noticed. One evening, as we walked home beneath a soft evening breeze, she glanced at me with concern. "You never tell him anything, do you?" she asked. "I try," I replied, hugging my coat tighter against the wind. "But he's always busy, uninterested." Her silence told me she understood, but it also made me feel more alone. Still, life had small pleasures. Cooking dinner after a long day of classes felt meditative, the sound of water boiling, the scent of garlic sautéing in olive oil, the warm glow of the stove light made the apartment feel alive. Evening walks home from the cafe allowed me to breathe in the cool air, listen to the faint rustling of leaves, and watch city lights flicker across wet pavement. My father worked abroad. My mother had passed years ago, leaving a quiet emptiness in the house where Jake and I had grown up. Without them, I had learned to manage alone, to appreciate small routines. The distance between Jake and me seemed natural, part of life's pattern. But deep down, I carried a quiet ache, a feeling that something essential was missing, that the silence I blamed on neglect might be hiding something I could not yet see. That afternoon, I returned from class to find the envelope sitting on the kitchen table. The crisp sound of paper snapping against the wood made my stomach twist. It was a bank statement, one I had expected to be routine. But as I unfolded it, confusion immediately clouded my mind. "Tuition paid?" I whispered to myself, scanning the numbers. Someone had covered my semester fees entirely. My eyes darted over the figures again and again. I hadn't applied for a scholarship or requested any assistance. My heart started racing and my hands felt clammy as I tried to make sense of the unfamiliar entries. I tapped the keys on my laptop, opening my online account to cross-check. Everything matched the statement. The sum had been deposited directly to the university. My brow furrowed. Anxiety twisted in my chest. Why would someone do this without telling me? I muttered under my breath, pacing the small living room. The cold air from the open window did little to calm the heat rising in my cheeks. I called the bank immediately, trying to maintain a steady voice. "Hello. I have a question about this transaction," I said, holding the paper tightly. The clerk on the other end was precise and professional. "Yes, it is recorded here. Someone paid it directly on your behalf," she said. "We cannot disclose personal information without proper authorization, but the payment is confirmed." I slumped into the chair, gripping the edge of the table. This doesn't make sense," I said aloud, my voice trembling slightly. My mind raced through possibilities. A mistake, a loan, some kind of aid I had forgotten to apply for, but nothing fit. Every scenario felt incomplete, unsatisfying. I imagined every person I knew, friends, professors, distant relatives, and rejected each possibility in turn. No one had ever been this secretive about money. No one had done something so significant without a word. A sense of disbelief mixed with frustration built inside me, tightening my chest. I rubbed my temples and glanced at the window again, the evening breeze brushing coldly against my arms, but it did nothing to ease the turmoil. Who could it be? I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. My mind circled back to Jake, my brother, the one I thought barely noticed my daily struggles. But that thought was impossible. He had never shown this kind of generosity, or had he? Could all these years of distance hide something else? My hands shook slightly as I folded the statement again, each crease marking the start of a mystery I had never anticipated. The first crack had appeared. My perception of Jake, of our relationship, began to shift, though I did not yet know in what direction. The quiet hum of the apartment felt heavier somehow, as if it were waiting for me to understand the truth behind this unexpected act. That evening, rain tapped steadily against my window, a soft but persistent rhythm that mirrored my restless thoughts. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at Jake's contact. My fingers hovered over the screen. Pride and uncertainty collided. I wanted answers, but I couldn't bring myself to ask directly. Finally, I typed slowly, carefully. "Did you help with my tuition?" My thumb hovered over send for a moment. I whispered to myself, maybe he'll tell me. Maybe he won't. The words felt small compared to the storm in my chest. Within seconds, a reply appeared. "Handle your own business, Alex." My heart sank, a dull ache pressing at my ribs. I stared at the text again, hoping it would change if I blinked long enough. But it didn't. The coldness in his words cut sharper than any confrontation could have. I felt a flush of frustration, a mixture of hurt and confusion. Did he always speak like this, or was it a shield? I rubbed my temples, the faint smell of burnt toast from the kitchen drifting up to remind me of the small comforts I had ignored while my mind raced. Later, I met Lisa at our usual cafe. The aroma of coffee mingled with the hum of conversation, a soothing backdrop to my restless thoughts. She tilted her head, noticing the shadow under my eyes. "You've been quiet today," she said softly. "What's going on?" I forced a smile. "Nothing, just tired." But the words felt hollow. She studied me for a moment, then leaned closer. "You never tell him anything, do you?" I frowned. "I try, but he's always busy, uninterested." My voice wavered slightly, betraying the uncertainty I was trying to hide. I wanted to tell her everything, the statement, the mysterious payment, the text. But pride stopped me. It had always stopped me from asking for help, from showing weakness. That night, walking home under the rain, I felt each drop soaking through my jacket, echoing the storm in my mind. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, shimmering like fragmented thoughts I couldn't piece together. I thought of Jake, of our quiet dinners, of years of unspoken words. Could he be capable of this generosity, or was it someone else entirely? The unanswered question gnawed at me. My chest felt tight, and my hands shook as I fumbled with my umbrella. Every echoing step down the narrow sidewalk reminded me of the distance I had always imagined between us, a gap that now felt larger than ever. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if my assumptions about him were wrong. If I had misread his coldness all these years, and if that was true, what else had I misunderstood? I avoided Jake for days, pretending to be busy with assignments and late nights at the library. Every time I saw him sitting silently at the kitchen table, eating his dinner without a word, a pang of anger stabbed at me. I wondered why he didn't ask about my grades, why he never inquired how I was coping with the tuition stress. His quiet presence, once comforting, now felt like deliberate distance. Sitting alone in my apartment one evening, the warm tea I had made cooled too quickly in my hands. I traced the rim of the cup with my fingers, staring at the faint steam curling upward, and thought, does he really hate me? My chest tightened, a mixture of disbelief and hurt. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, yet every corner seemed to echo with the distance between us. Lisa noticed the change immediately when we met at the cafe the next day. The fluorescent light above the tables felt harsh, making my eyes ache, but she studied me with concern. "You should talk to him," she said gently, stirring her cappuccino. "Misunderstandings grow in silence." I shook my head, staring at the swirling foam. "I can't. He'll just ignore me like always," I whispered. My voice sounded smaller than I felt inside, fragile beneath layers of frustration and fear. That night, I watched him from across the living room as he read quietly, the low lamplight tracing his features. Every movement seemed calculated, every silence deliberate. My mind twisted his gestures into signs of rejection, evidence of a hatred I could not escape. I felt isolated, trapped in my own assumptions, my pride preventing me from confronting the truth. Even my small joys, studying at the cafe, walking home under the evening breeze, felt muted. The aroma of coffee that usually lifted my spirits now reminded me of the conversations I wasn't having, the distance growing with every unspoken word. My heart ached with loneliness I didn't want to admit. I scrolled through my phone, hesitating on his contact again, debating whether to ask, to confront, to break the silence. But something in me recoiled. I imagined him dismissing me, brushing off my concerns as paranoia. Instead, I let my resentment grow quietly, feeding it with every cold glance, every quiet gesture I interpreted as neglect. By the time I fell asleep that night, my mind was racing, replaying every moment over and over. I felt anger, sadness, and a deep, aching sense of betrayal, though I wasn't even sure what I had been betrayed of. The seed of misunderstanding had taken root, and I was nurturing it with every thought. That evening, the rain tapped rhythmically against my windowsill, each drop echoing like a distant metronome, counting the seconds of my growing dread. I had opened the envelope from the bank without much thought, but as I unfolded the papers, my eyes widened in disbelief. Multiple tuition payments, all meticulously recorded, spanning years. My heart stuttered, then sank into a pit of guilt, so deep it seemed impossible to climb out. I sank onto my bed, gripping the bank statements in trembling hands. The paper felt cold, crisp, almost accusing. My chest tightened, as though the walls of my room were closing in, pressing me down into a heap of shame. Tears blurred my vision. I had assumed hatred, coldness, indifference, and yet all along, my brother had quietly carried burdens I never saw. Memories rushed back, unbidden and sharp. The small envelope of cash I had found in my backpack freshman year, the quiet encouragement when I stumbled over difficult courses, the note tucked in a birthday card saying, "Keep going, I've got you." I had dismissed these gestures as incidental, insignificant. Now, every one of them felt monumental, proof of a love I had mistaken for neglect. I curled into my pillow, face soaked with tears, feeling the soft fabric cling to my cheek as I whispered to myself, voice barely audible. All this time, I hated him for nothing? The words hung in the air like smoke, mingling with the damp scent of rain and the faint hum of the heater. My hands shook, my chest heaved, and I felt both heavy and hollow simultaneously. I had been blind, allowing pride and misinterpretation to dictate my emotions. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling through tear-stained eyes, a small spark of understanding began to flicker. Actions and words are not always aligned, I realized. He had loved me in ways I could not see, ways that required patience, discretion, and sacrifice. My anger and resentment now felt misplaced, almost petty compared to the quiet devotion he had shown. For the first time in weeks, a tremor of clarity passed through me. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, but slowly, the clouds of misunderstanding began to lift. I knew I could no longer remain in this spiral of assumption and self-pity. Something had to change, and it had to begin with me. That afternoon, the sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, warm and golden, cutting through the tension I had carried for weeks. The air smelled faintly of garlic and simmering tomato sauce, a smell that always reminded me of home. My stomach twisted nervously as I waited for Jake to arrive. I had rehearsed every question, every accusation in my head, but now that the moment was here, words seemed fragile, inadequate. When Jake walked through the door, he carried his usual calm expression, but his eyes softened the moment he saw me. I could hear the subtle creak of the floorboards beneath his steps, the soft rustle of his jacket. My racing heart slowed slightly, though my hands still trembled with anticipation. Alex, he began, voice low, careful. I know you've been angry. I can't change how you felt, but I need you to understand something. I swallowed hard. Just tell me, Jake. Please. Everything. He led me to the table and gestured for me to sit. The afternoon sunlight fell across the wooden surface, illuminating the small stack of bank statements I had brought with me. Jake took a deep breath. I never wanted you to feel like I controlled you, he said, eyes meeting mine. I wanted to help without being asked. Every payment, every extra expense. I paid quietly because I didn't want you to feel indebted or weak. I felt a wave of disbelief and shame wash over me. My shoulders slumped, my hands resting on the table, clammy and cold. I'm sorry, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. I misunderstood everything. I thought you hated me, that you didn't care. Jake reached across the table and took my hands in his. His grip was firm but gentle, grounding me. I would never hate you. I've always wanted you to succeed, to grow strong. That was my way of protecting you, even if it seemed distant. I could feel the tension in my chest dissolve as my lips trembled into a small, hesitant smile. Laughter bubbled unexpectedly from my throat, mixing with tears, a strange and cleansing combination. He laughed softly, too, relief mirrored in his expression. We hugged then, a long, unspoken reconciliation. The warmth of his arms, the smell of pasta still lingering in the air, the quiet hum of the apartment around us. It all felt like returning home after being lost for so long. I whispered, I never realized. Your silence was love. And your pride almost kept us apart, Jake replied, squeezing my hands gently. For the first time in weeks, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. Understanding had replaced anger. Misunderstanding had been lifted, and the quiet sacrifices that had gone unnoticed for so long were finally acknowledged. 5 years had passed since that afternoon, the moment when misunderstanding dissolved and our silent bonds finally spoke. I had graduated, diploma in hand, stepping into a stable career I loved. The anxiety and resentment that had once weighed heavily on my chest felt like distant echoes now, replaced by clarity and purpose. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee, the aroma curling around me as I organized fresh flowers on my desk. The small blossoms reminded me of quiet mornings with Jake, the subtle gestures of love that had always been there, unnoticed. I smiled, thinking of him as I sipped my coffee, the soft breeze drifting through the open window carrying the distant sounds of the city streets. Calm, peaceful, familiar. Jake and I spoke more openly now. Our relationship had strengthened through honesty and shared understanding. We laughed at old misunderstandings, reminisced about careless assumptions, and sometimes just sat in silence, enjoying the presence of someone who truly cared. I remembered small moments that had once frustrated me, the quiet phone calls he had taken while I studied late into the night, the way he seemed uninterested when in fact he was making arrangements behind the scenes, quietly supporting me. All those moments had a new meaning now, proof of a love that had never spoken loudly, but had always been present. "Alex," Lisa said one morning as we walked to the cafe, noticing my reflective smile. "You seem different, happier, lighter." I laughed softly, warmth spreading in my chest. "He always cared," I said, glancing at the direction of Jake's apartment across the street. "I just didn't see it before." Life had grown steady, predictable in the most comforting way. Even the small urban details, the hum of traffic in the distance, the smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery, the quiet chatter of neighbors, felt like part of a life rebuilt, carefully and intentionally. I had learned to appreciate what was quiet, what was unseen, and what had been there all along. Gratitude had replaced confusion. Patience had replaced doubt, and love, even when silent, had endured. I often sit in the quiet corner of the library, sunlight streaming softly through the tall windows, dust motes dancing in golden rays. The faint scent of old books surrounds me, grounding my thoughts as I reflect on the journey that brought me here. So many of my worries, so many sleepless nights, now seem almost trivial. I replay my assumptions, my misunderstandings with Jake, and the pride that kept me from asking questions directly. I whispered to myself countless times, "He doesn't care. He's distant. He must hate me." Yet, all along, the truth had been quietly unfolding, hidden in actions I failed to notice. Paying tuition without mention, leaving small notes of encouragement, protecting me from worry. These were gestures I had ignored, simply because I expected love to be loud. Sometimes the people who seem distant are carrying love in ways we cannot see. I realized that love is not always words spoken or attention constantly demanded. It can be patience, silent sacrifice, and actions performed without acknowledgement. Jake never sought praise, never forced recognition, yet every choice he made reflected loyalty and care. I want to tell everyone listening that subtlety in love is not weakness. When someone quietly supports you, sacrifices for you, or shields you from burdens, that is love in its purest form. We often overlook these gestures, too focused on appearances, missing the depth beneath. Miscommunication can create pain, but understanding and reflection can heal it. Now I notice more, the way my friends quietly encourage me, the thoughtful acts of my family, the moments of patience and support from those around me. Gratitude has grown, and with it, emotional maturity. I see that assumptions can blind us, and silence is not always indifference. As I close my notebook and step outside into the gentle afternoon, I carry a quiet wisdom. Actions speak louder than words. Love can be subtle, yet it remains powerful. Recognize it, appreciate it, and never take it for granted. Alex. Life teaches us lessons through love and misunderstanding. Cherish actions, not just words. Please like, share, and subscribe. I want to ask everyone watching, have you ever misunderstood someone you love? Perhaps a parent, sibling, or friend. Take a moment to reflect on the quiet ways people show care. Sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the deepest meaning. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to notice love in everyday actions, please leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs this reminder. By liking, sharing, and subscribing to Cozy English Story, you help more people discover stories that improve English and strengthen hearts. Every story is a lesson. Every viewer matters.